Hello, my name is Rick Ochoa, student at Cal Baptist University in the Doctor of Public Administration program. This presentation is part of DPA740, Collaboration and Networked Governance. The purpose of this presentation is to show the importance of government organizations being held accountable to their constituency. Accountability refers to the ability of all public sector employees to properly explain and justify their actions. So as we read this week's article by Jill Purdy titled A Framework for Assessing Power in Collaborative Governance Processes, we look at one of the main points in the article, and I quote, "In collaborative governance processes, organizations with varying degrees of cohesiveness, resources, and political clout interact in complex relational webs." So within this web of complexity is the idea that there are varying degrees of and sources of power, which leads us to the main crux of the article that we're using for this presentation. I quote, "The relational and perceptual aspects of power may be as important as the objective ability to command resources." In other words, when you or your organization are respected by the other participants as a person or an organization with especially trustworthy personalities or expert technical knowledge or vast levels of experience or perceived exceptional political or personal clout with larger decision-making bodies, then by extension, the assumption is that you have influence and power over this collaborative effort. So I liken the idea of perceived power versus literal power to the idea of a pastor versus an evangelist, where the pastor interacts with people on a daily basis. He knows his congregation, he prays with them, he laughs with them, he counsels with them, he knows their needs. And although he might not be the greatest orator and might be more introvert, but he knows how to preach to the needs of his people. Whereas the evangelist might come in one day and leave the next, and people flock to listen to this person preach because this person has that gift of preaching. They're an expert orator and they demand attention and people want to listen to them preach. So in the court of public opinion, this perceived power can become very influential. And in the collaborative effort, it's important to identify who these people are so that you can take them aside and help them to fully understand the mission and purpose of this collaborative effort so that they're not allowed to negatively impact the process without even realizing what they're doing. Everyone should be held accountable for their words and their actions. And ultimately, this provides legitimacy to the process, to the collaborative effort. When we think about public accountability, traditionally within government, we think of fiscal accountability or social accountability, but we also have to take into account this relational perceived power, and that needs to be put into check as well. Because when there's a lack of transparency, we get the idea of the metaphorical 800-pound gorilla in our living room that many perceive government to be. So whether the issue is fiscal or social accountability or accountability in collaborative efforts, the key to ensuring public trust is transparency. And that truly is an integral part of any democracy. So as we look at transparency, this idea, we see the example of the Sunshine Act of 1976, which is a great example of the government trying to become more transparent, where they have open government and meeting minutes having to be released to the public so that the public can understand not just the laws, but the logic behind the laws. And it removes this veil of complexity that seems to mask the legislative process or public officials themselves. And it creates a glass house effect, where everyone on the outside can see what's happening on the inside. And it creates the idea of more legitimacy. In conclusion, the idea that the collaborative effort must be transparent is a key component to the collaborative effort being effective. So relational and perceived power can be extremely influential, but it must be held accountable and kept in check so that there's legitimacy for each individual person in the collaborative effort, each participant, as well as the collaborative effort as a whole. It brings legitimacy to the whole process. Without this legitimacy and without this transparency, things start to break down. So that concludes my presentation. Thank you very much.